Welcome into College Football Addiction, a very important day for our country, for the most important reason being the national championship tonight. Hopefully, if you're arguing with strangers on the internet today about other things going on in our country, you stop that and you argue about what's really important, and that's college football and a national championship game that we have tonight. Our video today presented by BetUS. You can bet on the game with them. We'll talk about that in just a moment. All jokes aside, happy Inauguration Day, happy Martin Luther King Day. Very important things that do happen in our country. I just would like to focus on college football for a little while. When you look at this game tonight, I think if you could tell me how the quarterbacks played, I'd have a pretty good idea of how things go down. We've spoken with Zach Smith, former Ohio State coach. We've spoken with Joe DeLeon of the Ruffino and Joe Show and tried to get both of their perspectives. I'll link both those videos after this one, just in case you missed either one of them and you're binging national championship content, as our 2024 season will be officially over tonight. But if you told me how the quarterbacks played, I think I'd have a pretty good idea. Neither one of them incredibly sharp last week. Probably both of them had their worst performance of the playoffs, small sample size, just 3 games, last week. Now, some of that has to do with what? Well, they both played 2 really good defenses. Penn State played a very good game, I thought, against Riley Leonard, and I thought that the scheme that Texas dialed up and the athletes that Texas has, let's not kid ourselves that they're a really good defense too. They both kind of limited Leonard and Howard. Who bounces back better tonight? I'm inclined to think that Will Howard may have a slight edge there, not because I don't like Notre Dame's defense, not because I think that Ohio State's defense is so much better, but because of the weapons he's throwing to. I think Howard has a little bit more room for error because of the weapons that he gets to throw to. Now, I like Greathouse. I like Faison on the Notre Dame side. I'm not down on them at all. I love the running game. I love Jeremiah. No pun intended. But I do think that because of the weapons that Howard has, he has probably a little bit of an advantage. That doesn't mean that he can go out there and play sloppy, because if he does, Notre Dame is so opportunistic and they do such a great job of capitalizing on mistakes. But I think both of them, for their team to win tonight, need to be better than they were last week. The effectiveness of Notre Dame's defense is probably the most important aspect of this game to me. How can that secondary play against these insane wide receivers, this insane talent that Ohio State has? We've talked about it with both Joe and Zach. How in the world do you kind of go away from some of your man tendencies and get to limiting Ohio State's weapons? How effective Notre Dame's defense, and especially the secondary, is huge. And then obviously the defensive line. How much pressure can you get on Will Howard to affect his timing, to affect how comfortable he is? I thought Texas did a really good job of that in making him uncomfortable. And they limited some of what Ohio State wanted to do. You saw Howard try and force the ball into like triple coverage just because Jeremiah Smith was. You don't need to do that if you're Will Howard. But if you're Notre Dame and you could force him into some of those mistakes, I think that is a big, big help. Before we go on too much farther, I will give BetUS some love, like I said I would earlier. YouTube 150 is the code if you want to bet on the game tonight. You get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next 2. All of that up to $2,000. Again, it's YouTube 150 over at BetUS. Can Notre Dame get Jeremiah Love going? Can he be a big-time piece and they not be so reliant on having to use Leonard's legs, having to convert on 3rd and longs, having to be in situations where it's 3rd and 9, where if Love picks up 4 or 5 yards on 1st or 2nd down, you're looking at a 3rd and 2. And the entire playbook is open to you. If they can get Love going, if they can get that running game going, if they can use Leonard's legs effectively and in spots, just at certain times, right? This Ohio State defense is really, really good. I would compare them to Georgia, right? And that's kind of how I see this game going down. And if that's the case, the running game for Notre Dame is going to have to be better than it was against Georgia. Now, they did enough, but they scored 9 points if you take away turnovers and special teams. which you can't take those things away, right? Notre Dame could certainly score that way, but are you confident that you get a kick return for a touchdown? Are you confident that you force a fumble at the 11-yard line? Those are fluky, not fluky, right? Like you made the plays, but those are things I don't think you can count on in games. Notre Dame fans, I would imagine, would agree. Can they get the running game going? And I thought they did a great job of that in the second half against Penn State. That is a nasty Penn State front. And they did a good job of moving some things around, adjusting some things, having to do somewhat so out of necessity due to injuries. They did a good job getting the running game going. If they can do that tonight, they'll have a much better chance in this game. You cannot do a preview like this and not talk about the weapons that Ohio State has. And I thought what Will Howard did really, really well in the beginning of the Texas game was he took what the defense gave him, right? Jeremiah Smith was blanketed early and for much of the game. Texas said he's not going to beat us. We will shade his way. I don't know that Notre Dame can do that, first of all, so I will say that he probably won't be as blanketed. But if he is, if they put 4 guys on him, take the pass to Trey. Take the pass to Emeka. They will be there. And if not, the running game will be there. And those guys out of the backfield will feast. But your guys will be there. Trust what you see if you're Will Howard. How good is this Ohio State defense? When you really look at it, and you really look at what they have done. Now, Texas put up a decent amount of yards on them, right? 360, I think. I don't have the number right in front of me. And obviously, they were a yard or two away from getting up to 21 points. But is 21 points enough for Notre Dame tonight? It might be. Could they win this game 21-17? They could. Could Notre Dame absolutely turn this into a rock fight and their defense, which has been really, really good all year and found a way all year, could they get it done? Absolutely. But I know that Ohio State defense is going to show up tonight, and I just wonder how effective Notre Dame can be against it. Is there a coaching advantage in this matchup? As we start to run through things and get closer to predicting this thing, who do you like more out of Chip Kelly and Al Golden? And if you're a fan of one of those two teams and you comment below, I know who you're going to pick, right? You're going to pick your guy. But if you're a neutral, if you're an outsider, if you're me, both of them have been phenomenal this year. I don't know that there's an advantage there, but it is a matchup that I cannot wait to see. Chip Kelly's offense, Al Golden's defense, two of the best units in the country this year. How do they clash? Who has more wrinkles? Who has more tricks up their sleeve in Atlanta tonight? I think that'll go a long way to telling us. What about at the top? What about Marcus Freeman versus Ryan Day? Marcus Freeman has been huge this postseason and really this year in not only motivation, but also scheming. He has outcoached Kirby Smart already in this playoffs. And so if I told you at the end of the day today, Ohio State fans, I think, have forgiven Ryan Day for some transgressions, not all of them. But if I told you, no matter what the final score was, no matter who ended up winning, but if I told you that Marcus Freeman outcoached Ryan Day, I don't think anybody would be shocked by that. But I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion. I don't know that I think Ryan Day is really good. And I know the Michigan stuff is weird. And I know that Ohio State fans are probably sick of hearing it and sick of thinking about it and sick of the fact that it even exists. But I think Ryan Day is really, really good. I don't think it would shock anybody if Marcus Freeman outcoached Ryan Day tonight. Whether Notre Dame wins or not, we'll see. But I wouldn't be shocked if it went the other way either. I think Ryan Day is really, really, really good. The two biggest questions I have in this game, as many as I've asked already, but the two biggest are, how much did Notre Dame find their offense in the second half last week against Penn State? You remember that first half. It was terrible. They couldn't get anything going. They had to get a backup in there just to go get 3 points when they had injuries on the offensive line, and they were checking out Riley Leonard. And I almost think that having the backup come in helped them a little bit because it just forced them to play a little bit differently. It was something that maybe Penn State wasn't expecting, and they got back to just getting the ball out quick, having to run in the hurry up, getting down the field, and getting the field goal. I think it helped them that they had to change things up a bit. Now, obviously, you want Leonard back for the second half, and he looked really good. But how much did they find their offense? Because for 6 quarters, the offense wasn't that impressive, right? They weren't incredibly impressive against Georgia. They weren't incredibly impressive in the first half against Penn State. And really, if you go back and you take away the 98-yard touchdown run that they had against Indiana, I wouldn't say the offense was overly impressive against Indiana either. Now, it didn't need to be. Their defense was so stout in that game that they didn't need to have a crazy impressive offense, but they looked really good in that second half against Penn State. How much can they build on that? How much can they really get things kind of moving in the right direction offensively? That's my biggest question. My second biggest question is, how much did Ohio State come back down to earth last week against Texas versus how much did Texas just play up and play well? We saw Ohio State blow the doors off of Oregon and Tennessee. And we saw Texas struggle with Arizona State, and not necessarily struggle, but not close the door on Clemson like they probably should have, especially defensively. And so how much of that was Texas just finally starting to figure things out and get back to playing well, and how much of it was Ohio State coming back down to earth? If Ohio State has come back down to earth just a little bit, I think it opens the door for Notre Dame. If last week was a fluke against Texas and Ohio State really isn't back down to earth, then I think Notre Dame's in trouble. If you gave me the answer to those two questions, though, how much did Ohio State come back down to earth and how much did Notre Dame find their offense versus was Notre Dame did they just kind of get lucky with one good half of offense compared to 3 games of offense or 2.5 games that wasn't as stellar as Notre Dame fans would want it to be? If you told me the answer to those two questions, I could tell you who would win this game. But I don't know the answers to those questions, and I won't know them until probably 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11 if ESPN gets as many commercials in as they would like to in tonight's game. Thank God this thing is starting at 7:30, right? It'll really start at like 7:50. But thank God that this thing ain't starting like at 9 like they normally do a national championship. But if you could answer those two questions for me, I will tell you who would win. And I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think Notre Dame's offense will be as effective as we saw in the second half of the Penn State game, but I don't think it'll be as lackluster as we saw over the first 2.5 games. I don't think Ohio State has fully come back down to earth. I don't think they're back down to where they were against Michigan the last week of the regular season. But I also would say they're probably not as clicking on all cylinders as they were against Oregon and Tennessee. And with both those things kind of leveling out, I think we'll get a good game here. I think we'll get a fun game here. I think we'll get a game that is enjoyable here. And at the end of the day, I think Notre Dame covers this spread. Again, at BetUS right now, I saw this morning it was at 9 points. Now, it may move before we get to the game. I don't know when you'll watch this. I don't know if you'll watch it after the game and tell me how wrong I was about everything. But I think we'll get a good one-score game. But I just think Ohio State's probably a little bit too much. All rooting interest aside, I'll tell you, my heart, I like Marcus Freeman. I like Riley Leonard. I like cheering for Notre Dame. Ohio State's been a fun team to cheer for. I like Jeremiah Smith a lot. I like what they do offensively. I like that everyone doubted Will Howard and nobody thought that he could get them to this point. We had Zach Smith on in the offseason, and when I asked him about Will Howard, he let a few expletives fly because he said, TJ, everything else looks good, but man, they just don't know about quarterback. And so I like where and how Will Howard has led this team. So I like both teams. My heart would say that I'd like to see an upset here. My heart would say I'd like to see the team that everybody counted out when they lost to Northern Illinois. My heart would say I'd like to see Notre Dame win this. I'll tell you, I'm just being honest. If I had a rooting interest, I would root for Notre Dame in this one. But my head still says that Ohio State probably is just the slightly better team. Nothing against Notre Dame. They've won 14 games this year. You know how hard it is to win 14 games in a season? To keep doing it, to go against the very best week after week after week here in the playoffs and find a way to win. They've done it 3 times now. Can they do it a 4th? I kind of hope so. I kind of think it'd be fun to see Notre Dame. They've almost become a likable team somewhat. I just don't think it happens. I think I'm leaning Ohio State here to win by 6, something like 27-20, 26-21. I don't know, somewhere in there. Give me Ohio State by a little less than a touchdown. But a phenomenal game, a classic in Atlanta. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear you predict this thing. I'll tell you, I'll link both videos here right at the end so you can watch them that we talked with Joe and talked with Zach if you want a specific team perspective. But these are my high-level thoughts for the game tonight. We will be changing this background some, and the first way we're going to change it is we're going to get a trophy for the team that wins. So if Ohio State wins, we're getting a replica trophy and putting it back there. And we're going to do that every year here on College Football Addiction, as we've just celebrated our 1-year anniversary for the national champion. If Notre Dame wins, we'll put a Notre Dame trophy back there, and we will have a special video for it. We will have a lot of fun with it. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, Ohio State fan, make sure you're subscribed. If your team's not in the championship this game, which there are 132 of them that are not, make sure you're subscribed so that we see if your team can get back there on the wall next year. We appreciate you guys for tuning in to College Football Addiction. Appreciate BetUS for their support as well. Let me know how wrong I am down in the comments, and we will talk to you guys soon.